this is an introduction to Craig's presentation, and hopefully it won't last very long, won't take all of his important, valuable time. But it's just to emphasize the importance of this subject matter, that this is critical to getting to a net carbon zero in 2050. Regenerative farming and its role in the carbon cycle, carbon removal. This carbon removal is part of the IPCC 2018 recommendation, shall we say. And one way to look at these goals, that this is one of the simplest, most straightforward means from a technological standpoint in reaching our goals for net carbon zero. And that, of course, is what we're doing here is we're sequestering carbon in the soil. And just give a quick review. This is from NOAA. This is a little pic of the carbon cycle. And just for your information, there's many times more carbon stored in the soil, in the first few meters of soil, than there is in the atmosphere. It's between 3 and 4 times. But this shows the complete cycle from the biota to the atmosphere, to the oceans, to the deep oceans, to the crustal plates. And I got a scary photograph for everyone next. This is the greenhouse gases emitted since the beginning of the industrial era. And you can see that since about 1950, after World War II or so, I guess, there's been a tremendous increase in the amount of greenhouse gases put in the atmosphere. And the United States and China, of course, are the largest producers of same. Scary. And then this is an excerpt from the IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And I've shown highlighted in yellow the important statement that this is the preferred method is carbon reduction is with natural means, let's say. And this is written right into the IPCC report. Just going back one slide, and you might wonder, okay, what other methods would one consider doing this? And I don't know if all of these are written into the IPCC report, but all these are discussed. Accelerated weathering of the oceans and the coastal areas. And what that means is enhancing the growth along coastal areas, seaweed, and even dumping iron ore into the southern oceans. But what this means is more mining. So you'd have to mine those minerals, not only iron, but other rocks, and crush them and haul them. Obviously, there's issues there. Then there's direct carbon capture and sequestration. And what this is, they do make these machines already. They're operational in Germany already, that remove carbon. But obviously, you need energy for these. You need some type of power to power the direct carbon capture machine. And then you have to sequester the carbon in some manner or form, which can be problematic. And then another that's not too exciting, I would say, is bioenergy and carbon capture and sequestration. What this means is to generate your electricity, have a specifically designated land area where you clear the vegetation, use the vegetation in a boiler and a generator, and you burn it for electricity. So supposedly, and you capture the carbon out of this. Then the I'll skip to the last one, is solar flux reduction. And this is not talked about in IPCC, I do not believe. It's aerosols in the air, which is albedo, another albedo enhancement. That means you paint buildings and roofs white, mirrors and shades in the sky, kind of way out there, you might say. But the practical methods are agricultural practice and land use change and forestry. And then quickly, agriculture's contribution to greenhouse gases is about 24%. This is, there's references for this. You don't have to take my word for it. And then, like I mentioned before, the size of the carbon sink is 3.2 to 4 times in the soil of what's in the atmosphere. And then they're already moving forward on this initiative, the I think it's 4P1000. They're already moving forward on this in Europe and trying to figure out a way to actually measure that carbon in the soil. Another interesting item is that land use change and agriculture. Now, when we talk about land use change, we're talking about clearing land, highways, dams, buildings, suburbs, 5-car garages. In total, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, have produced 44% of the carbon that's in the atmosphere. And then I would recommend for everyone to watch the movie Kiss the Ground. It gives you a background on regenerative farming. And with that, I'm going to introduce Craig Fisher. He is owner and operator of Sleepy Bison Acres in Sleepy Eye, Minnesota. And he started this business in 2013 in order to produce healthy food for his family and the local community. And his mission is to be regenerative by nature, healthy soil, these healthy animals, healthy people. And I'll let Craig get on with this. I took too much time already.
All right, hey, yeah. If we're ready on the trailer right now, I'm getting ready for a round. Okay, so we started in 2013. My wife and I did. Really, the farm started because we wanted to know where our food was coming from, and we wanted to know where our food was coming from and know that it was healthy. The food that we had produced and were used to, the quality that we were used to, we weren't finding as easily. So we took it on our own selves to produce that food. And then, you know, we live on the farm site that, hold on. Yeah, slow down. Those are our cards. Okay, I'm on the phone right now. We're trying to get the kids loaded up.
We entirely understand. You're doing great, Craig.
Sounds like
Thanks.
that ad on TV.
So yeah, we if we didn't raise it, we had to buy it. So we had decided that we were going to buy a pig from a 4-H'er. I was in 4-H my whole life, and it seemed like a good, easy way to support, you know, a local kid that has agriculture in mind. We bought the pork, we tasted it, and I took one bite. They said, we can do better than this. So we added pigs in 2014, and then I've been raising pasture pigs ever since then. And then no, Bryce, your bikes are not in the back of the truck. Sorry. So in 2014, we started raising pasture pigs, and we've been running them through the woods using a pasture-based system. It's just in the woods. So technically speaking, it would be called a silvo pasture, SILVO pasture, which is basically just a pasture in the woods. And we rotate the pigs around. Our pigs don't stink. So as you can tell, I mean, you drive down the road and you walk or drive by a confinement barn area where they're spreading manure, and that manure makes you curl your nose. Your body's kind of telling you that something's off. So we want to not only have our system where the food is healthy, but it's healthy for the soil, and we know that it's healthier for the people. So we always want something growing, whether it's the bison, the pigs, or the chickens. We want to keep the soil covered as much as we can. Hold on again, please. Grace, we're not bringing our bikes because we're not going to be biking around. No, ask mom, okay? All right, I'm trying to walk back to the area of the grove here. Let's see, how can I do this here? Now, I'm gonna try and take there we go. Okay, so this is part of our woods, literally behind the house. And we've had pigs 20 feet away from the house before. But basically by me saying that, our pigs don't stink. My wife would not allow the pigs to be next to the house if the pigs stunk. So pigs are a real easy way to realize if you're doing things right or not, because they smell if you're not doing things right. So basically we want to farm in nature's image. So we want our pastures to be green, lush. We want our animals to be in their natural system as much as they can. You know, whether it's bison, whether it's pigs, what have you, we just want our animals to be happy. If they're happy, then they're healthy. If they're healthy, we are healthy. A good way to have the animals healthy is to have healthy soil. So that was kind of long-winded and distracted by children, but yeah, we started in 2013. We had been fascinated with bison for the previous 3 years. We wanted to not be the average Joe and have Black Angus cattle on a small, overly grazed pasture. So over time, we ended up trending, you know, from the bison to bison on a rotational grazing system. And then the picture you see in my background is of one of our bulls grazing some grass. So we also split our rotational grazing paddocks up into smaller sections, and we do what's called strip grazing. So if you think of it like you go from a square to a rectangle or a square to a smaller square, so you're able to concentrate the effects of your grazing so that you're affecting a smaller space, you're disturbing a smaller space for a shorter period of time, and then allowing it a longer rest period before you're coming back. So, you know, this bull in the background here, he is it's actually oats that they're grazing right there, and he actually pulled the whole plant out. But if you see his mouth, he roughly has 1/3 of that plant in his mouth. That is actually exactly what we want them to take off. The other 2/3 we want them to leave behind. So ideally, every time we go through the pasture, we're taking that top third. It's the ideal balance of protein and energy for the animal, and it also has enough root mass and solar collection points left on it, or leaves, that the root system is unaffected and the root system can grow back faster. So with a grazing system, with a proper grazing system, you're focusing on converting solar energy into a usable product. So with grazing, we're trying to convert solar energy into meat or eggs or something that we can sell. So that's how we get paid for it. So by doing a much more in-depth pasture management system, we're able to achieve our goals of healthy soil, healthy animals, healthy plants. So we've done pasture moves anywhere from once a week to once a day to 4 times a day. We did that one with the bison before, and that's a little much for a parent with children, let alone a person that has a normal life, because even on an 8-hour day, you're moving them every 2 hours. You can't do much else in a day. But the pigs, they move anywhere from once every 2 weeks when they're little down to, I've even moved them 12 hours after moving them before. So it's, to keep it simple, it's all supply and demand. We're just balancing supply and demand of the grass and the animal that's grazing. And so whether it's pigs, whether it's chickens, whether it's bison, we're still balancing that supply and demand effect. And when you're grazing, it's that much more important that you balance out your supply and demand, because if you're 100% grass fed, you don't have, you have to fall back on hay, or you run out of pasture, they eat more than you want them to, which means your recovery period is going to take longer than you want it to. So the system is a little more complex, is a lot more complex than a typical fixed grazing system. I've heard it described as the Columbus effect. You turn your animals out in the spring, and then you just rediscover them again in the fall. So, I mean, we're trying to balance our goals. We're trying to balance within our context of the family. You know, how do we move the animals like we'd want, but still have time for the family, still have time for meat deliveries, that, you know, we still have our full-time jobs. My wife and I both work full-time. But, you know, as you get into it, you start learning about the potential of solar conversion. You know, going back to the pigs, I should reaffirm the point. So pigs eat a higher protein ration. Protein, if you think of it, is basically nitrogen. And nitrogen can be chemically unstable, which, if you think about it, ammonia is NH3. NH3, or ammonia, smells. That's basically what goes into a confinement barn. A confinement barn system, when it's in a pit, it becomes unstable. There's an excess amount of nitrogen, which creates the smell that we associate with a hog barn. So with our pigs, being they're in a pasture system, and they're eating grass, they're eating forage, they're eating carbon. The carbon is offsetting the nitrogen imbalance. So by carbon and nitrogen being balanced, the pig no longer smells. So with our grazing system, again, it's about solar conversion. It's about solar conversion, but one of the main things that you're able to do is convert carbon. By converting solar energy, you're converting carbon, which is fueled off of photosynthesis. You're converting that into dollars, or ideally that's the goal. So with your photosynthesis converting carbon, it's important to keep those plants growing, and that's where we get back to that principle of take a third and leave a third when we're grazing. With the bison, we can do that. It's a lot harder with the pigs, so we need a longer rest period after the pigs have gone through, or we plant cover crops behind them to try and keep plants growing as much as we can. So if you look in the background here, this is pigs and grazing system. And then this is a couple days into the system here where they're just kind of camped out, but they'll dig things up. And, again, we want to keep plants growing behind them. So that's one of the reasons why we go back through with cover crops. If you're looking at my background here, here's a couple of the kids with the little chicks. And then this is as they are pullets. They're not quite ready to lay eggs at this point. Then we moved them out to a trailer where during the summer we were able to move that trailer around to different spots so that the nitrogen doesn't accumulate in one spot and the chickens spread their impact around. In the background here, this is our grazing system at home. Again, we'll split that into smaller acres or areas depending on what time of year it is and supply and demand of that time. And then with our cow herd, they're actually on a different property. It's a lot more hilly, so it's more difficult for labor and just geography because of all the hills on how we strip graze these. So again, it comes down to context. How are you able to split these animals up? What time of year it is during the winter. The bison are so well insulated that, unless they touch the fence with their nose, they really aren't gonna get a shock. And when the ground is frozen, it doesn't allow for the electrical current to properly ground like it should.
Watch your window, boys.
And then the cow herd, it's always nice to see the grass in the spring growing up. Again, another picture here at home. And then our business is Sleepy Bison Acres. So the farm business, how we're able to convert that carbon into money is selling meat, selling eggs. So whether that's bison, pork, eggs, blending that all together. And yeah. So basically, how can farmers, I should recap, how can farmers help? Farmers can help by farming in nature's image. So if a farmer is going out producing the product the way that God had designed the system, I think that's a real easy way for us to connect the dots. And when we farm like that, how can a normal customer, how can somebody that eats meat, eats eggs, support that? They support that farmer. You buy from that farmer that's doing things the way that you believe they should be done. And that's kind of how we create change. So it's enough of the rambling from me. If there's any questions, I would be willing to field those.
Greg, this is such a wonderful presentation, and you've got us all captured with your creative use of the backgrounds to be able to spotlight all the videos too. That was really effective use of technology. This is your chance, everyone, to ask a real life bison farmer any questions and have a real dialogue just about ongoing practices. So I'll start us off with one, Craig, since we're looking for others in the chat or unmuted, and then we'll get to any others. And that was, how did you decide to start with bison? I know that you kind of told your origin story with pigs, but what was it with bison that kind of got you interested and drawn in?
So I remember being captivated when I was 5 years old, playing Oregon Trail on my mother's computer at her work. And I shot a bison on Oregon Trail and had commented to my mom how much meat there was, and my party was going to live forever. I was going to beat the game. And that was my first experience with bison, but I associated it with the game. You know, that's something that used to be. It wasn't necessarily like that. I really didn't know that raising bison was even an option, a realistic option, until I was 2 weeks away from starting my freshman year at college. And I was at the state fair for 4-H. We were bumming some time before I had to present, and ended up, I saw the Minnesota Buffalo Association tent, or their booth, by the Coliseum on the fairgrounds. And right next to it was the Minnesota Elk Breeders Association tent. And my parents were with me. You know, I grew up in South Central Minnesota. I'm not comfortable driving in the cities, let alone what's all at the state fair. So they came with me because they knew the lay of the land. And I knew my mom wanted to go in the elk breeders tent because she had been considering elk at that time. And growing up, we had cats at our place. The farm that we live on now is where I grew up. The only animals we ever had growing up was cats. My mom and dad both lived off the farm. Both of them grew up in a dairy background. Both of them didn't want to continue the high stress workload with that. So growing up, we didn't have anything at home. And now we have bison, pigs, and chickens. We've had turkeys. We also have guineas. We have a dog. You can classify the 3 kids as whatever kind of animals you'd like. Yeah, I mean, it's not something that was, I guess, a clear thing coming down the road. It was just like, wow, that's actually a thing yet. They're not extinct. So anyway, I walked in the Elk Breeders Association tent. My parents followed. They started looking at stuff. I slipped out and went into the Bison Association tent and ended up meeting one of our mentors. It was actually, I met Connie first and I met Jim later, and we still keep in regular dialogue with them. This is back in 2009 at this point. But we still keep regular contact with them. Long story short, they lived 10 minutes away from where I was starting school in 2 weeks. So I went over to their place, checked things out, and he said, I asked him, I said, you know, you can just raise bison? And he's like, oh yeah, you don't need a special permit or anything, you know, they're not exotic. They're the most native species here. You know, he said, if you think about it, beef and pork and chicken are exotic to North America. They were imported. So, you know, we kind of had that conversation and things kind of started. We were looking into the industry. Again, we started in 2013. So from 2009 to 2013, my college years, so to speak, we were just kind of building information, learning more about the industry. Hey, is this a good choice of an industry? They're attractive. You get bit by the bison bug, so to speak, and it's hard to shake that when you get attracted to it. But you know, I don't know, you just kind of get hooked. And then Jim and Connie, as they're at Big Shaggy Buffalo Farm by Byron, Minnesota, which is by Rochester. They knew to get us started in 2013, they would have to help us out and kind of kick the tires for the system. Because my parents, while we looked it up, my parents didn't think that this was a thing. So Jim and Connie actually gifted us a bison for our wedding present with the agreement that we buy another one, because you can't just have one bison. They're a herd animal. So you need to have more than one. So they knew if they gifted us one, we had to buy another one. We had to build a fence. Now we had to have a spot to put these animals. So that was their way of getting us started, and that's how we got started. So we went from 2 in November of 2013. We picked up 3 more a few weeks later, and now we're sitting at 54 head. We did touch 60 here this last early winter, I guess, before we butchered. Yeah, it was an early winter, probably January. We were at 60 head, which was the first time we touched that. So, I mean, bison are just cool. I played 4 years of college baseball. I appreciate the athleticism and the durability of them. They can run 35 miles an hour. They can outrun a horse. They can outcorner a horse. They can jump a 6 feet fence if they so choose. If you keep them happy with good feed and good water, they're not going to go anywhere. But just that sheer athleticism was cool. And then the thing that really sold me on it, I had found, and while I was looking in college, I had found, they're heart healthy meat. Bison is heart healthy. My grandpa died my sophomore year of high school with a sudden massive heart attack. There's a little bit of heart history in my family. So I thought, you know what, if we're going to eat something that that's going to affect our health, maybe we should be eating something that's heart healthy. And bison fit that description. And the thing that really sold me on it, though, I was like, yep, I'm going to do this. I found a study. It was in, they focused on an area in Georgia where they found these Native American remains, and they looked into their diet, and they figured if these people would have had proper dental care, they would have lived to be 125. I thought, yep, that's the way for me. Yeah, my wife says she's in the dental field, so we should live a long time. But yeah, the diet to these people, like, yeah, they had a little fish, but their mainstay of their diet was bison and the wild game. So it seemed to make sense, like, hey, this is something that we should do. It's different. I mean, we lovingly say we're the largest bison producers in South Central Minnesota. Well, we're one of like 2 in South Central Minnesota, because the land is so good down here. Pasture is uncommon, and having animals set stocked grazing, where you just that Columbus method, turn them out in the spring and pick them up again in the fall, or you're feeding hay throughout the summer out in the pasture. That's the normal practice. So by us rotationally grazing, that's different. But then we kept taking it different steps. So we're not only rotational grazing, but we're rotationally grazing taller grass by utilizing high stock density grazing. So again, we're concentrating our impact and moving the animals, because the taller the grass, the deeper the roots. The deeper the roots go, the more nutrients they can pull up from the soil below. So it creates a more healthy whole product for the consumer as well. So long-winded answer, but that's the story, and I'm sticking to it.
Perfectly done. We have a couple other questions here in the chat.
Sure.
Do you know, well, actually, both of these you kind of spoke to. Could you speak to how many acres it takes to raise the 60 head of bison?
Sure. So that depends on supply and demand. So we're going back to the supply and demand context, that how many acres it takes you depends on how productive your land is, and basically how much rain you get and the fertility of your soil. So our area down here, they claim it takes 1 acre for 1 animal unit. And the extension office, the University of Minnesota Extension, they basically figure that off as 6 months, because we basically have 6 months to grow our forage in Minnesota. Another 6 months are frozen. So they figure 1 acre per 1 animal unit for 6 months. So, and they just assume you're going to be feeding hay the rest of the year. Otherwise, you need 2 acres for that 1 animal unit. The one way that we get around or like start building fertility is we actually feed hay out on our pastures. They're spreading the nutrients out. We're feeding the animals, but they're also spreading the nutrients as they grow, as they're grazing on that hay. And they're peeing, they're pooping on that pasture. So there's less of a impact from us because we don't have to spread that manure when they're out on the pasture spreading it for themselves or by themselves. We don't have to start the tractor up, start the skid loader up, use a skid loader to fill the spreader, use the spreader to haul it out to the field. It's not only more, I mean, in terms of this conversation, ecologically friendly, but it's also more financially friendly, because every time you turn the key on a piece of equipment, it costs you money. So by building up our pasture, we've been able to make our pasture more productive. I would wager that we are beyond that 1 animal unit per acre. I think we can support more animal units per acre than just 1, whether that's 1 1/3 or 1 1/2. I can't apply that definitively, but I know our forage is much better than it was when we started. So for context, I also know in South Dakota, we have friends that they have 1 animal unit for 30 acres in their area. And now this ranch is down to 1 animal unit for 12 acres. So they're doing something similar where they're increasing their land's productivity by just how they're managing the land. Is that acceptable of an answer?
That's a great response. And I see a couple of other folks here. I just have one other question, Greg, myself, and then we'll get to some of the other ones on the phones. And that is, so here we are celebrating Earth Day. And as a lot of environmentalists on the line today, we realize the importance that agriculture plays in sequestration of carbon and really managing kind of the overall regenerative cycle, as you've highlighted so articulately in your talk. What are some things that we can learn from you as a farmer, as a rancher? What kind of solutions, in terms of policies, in terms of government support or education, you name it, do you wish that environmentalists, were more aware of or could build coalitions around and supported you?
I think first and foremost, if there is not a market to support a farm or ranch operation that's operating like we are trying to, there's not incentive for them to do this. So first and foremost, we have to have somebody that is interested in the market that we are, or the products that we are producing. So for ourselves, by somebody buying pork from a pastured pork operation versus pork that's cheap in the grocery store that was raised in confinement in a hog barn that makes you curl your nose, you're telling the market as a whole, I want less of the confinement barns and I want more of the pasture pork. So that is a clear way to send the message. That doesn't get out to the masses that, hey, this is you know, I don't want to see a law that says we can't have confinement pork anymore. We can't have barn raised pork. Because I don't want somebody telling me what I can and can't do, because that would translate to other things. But I am strongly in favor of customers being educated about where their food is coming from, knowing their farmer, and you know, we don't use chemicals on the farm, but we are not certified organic either. I put more weight in being customer certified. So that customer can ask us questions. They're welcome to tour the farm, see what they want, ask what they want, and we will tell them. And our customers are the ones that are certifying us and approving of us. So, you know, there's a lot of talk about carbon credits, and developing a market for that. So farmers that can show that they are storing carbon in the soil will get paid for the carbon that is stored in the soil. You basically need to start from ground zero and figure out where you're at in terms of how much carbon is in your soil. Plainly speaking, I think if people understand organic matter, you establish your baseline of your organic matter, how much carbon is in your soil. And then as you keep going, you keep testing to see where you're at. And over time, your organic matter and your carbon in your soil will increase. So pretty much when one increases, the other one does. So that's developing. I think it's a long way from being where it probably should be. But again, the consumer, whether it's through carbon credits or through meat or pastured eggs or what have you, the consumer is telling the farmer what they should be producing. So I don't know. I'm more of a fan of deregulation, so to speak, and just letting the consumers dictate what the supply should be. So I don't have a very political answer for that.
No, that's great. And, you know, honestly, at this point, Craig, I'm going to pass it to Russ to field our Q&A for the last 5-10 minutes here. I am putting a link where people can find the worship link at 10:30. But I know one of the main questions that people are really curious about still is where they can find your products. Are they part of local co-op stores, online? What would you recommend in terms of kind of people tracking down how they can support you, speaking of markets?
Sure. So we've been focusing on just going direct to consumer. That's where we started. That's where we feel we can make the most impact, or the most definitive impact. So before COVID, we were in 7 different restaurants, and that was pretty well spread out between the southeast Minnesota and southwest Minnesota. Kind of follow the highway, and we were spread out through there. After COVID, during COVID now, we're down to 4 different restaurants, and 3 of them are still consistent. So the impact that we get from the restaurants is nice, but it's not, it's kind of unreliable right now. So we're looking at getting into different food stores within the state. We always have to make sure we make our ends meet. So one thing we had the mind to do, this is actually before COVID, January of 2020, we started our website. And our website allows anyone to order from Sleepy Bison Acres and we can ship it anywhere within the state. We work with a state inspected facility. We actually work with a USDA inspected facility too. Anything that's state inspected, which is like all of our products, we can ship within the state. If it's USDA inspected, we can ship anywhere within the US. So basically, anyone that would be willing to support us or is looking to support us could just type in Sleepy Bison Acres into Google, and then it would be it's going to be one of the first 3 options on the Google search. That it would have our website. It would likely have our website, our Minnesota Grown page, and our Facebook page. So the most complete support for us is if somebody would be following us on social media and supporting us on there and supporting us through the website. So if somebody puts in an order, we get that order packed. We send a message to them and say, hey, your order is packed. Then we'll reach out to you personally through your phone or email or what, and say, would you like that shipped? Would you like to pick it up? And if somebody would like it shipped, then we just arrange for shipping and likely ship it on a Monday. And it usually gets anywhere within the state by either Tuesday or Wednesday.